off yesterday. So yesterday, just as a quick recap, we talked about habits and we talked about the futility of goals, right? Meaning, sort of the point of that conversation was it's better to focus on your process or your system rather than on the goals, right? You can get better outcomes if you're not so caught up in the target, but rather you focused on the process itself. And then we sort of ended the conversation talking about identity and how we can use how we can change our identity in order to get better results in life, in order to get better, build better habits. Habits being the process within the new identity. So, for example, we used the example of the smoker, right? So we said, if you are trying to quit smoking, or if someone hands you a cigarette and you say, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit, that's one thing, versus if you said, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker, that's a different thing, right? So that your likelihood of success in ceasing your smoking habit in the first scenario is probably lower than when you tell yourself, you change your identity, you say to yourself, I am not a smoker, right? So it's that whole identity shift that can lead to better outcomes when you try to change habits. So the thing about changing habits, it's hard, right? Dropping bad habits is hard, and building new habits is hard. But the author that I was referring to last week, James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, says, it's hard to change habits for two reasons. One is we are changing the wrong thing, i.e., we're trying to change the behavior as opposed to changing the identity. And then we're changing it in the wrong way, right? So his suggestion is you start with your identity and then you move to your process and then you move to your behaviors. And so that's a much better way. And so what I want to talk about today is I want to kind of extend that topic and present to you 4 steps to building a better habit. And so 4 steps are motivations, triggers, repetition, and rewards. And so I'm going to take one of those, take each one at a time. So let's start with motivation. So to get good habits result from powerful motivations. And this is sort of like talking about goals, but really it's kind of broader than a goal. It's really about a thing that motivates you. Why do you want to have the change in behavior? What's the reason for it? And so oftentimes we tell ourselves, I need to change that behavior. I need to lose weight. I need to stop smoking. I need to stop drinking. I need to start walking more, whatever it is. We just kind of say that, in a sort of intellectual sort of way. We recognize that is needed, but we don't take the extra step to really enforce the behavior. And then we wonder why we don't get the outcome, right? So what these 4 steps are going to do is it's going to force you to be a little bit more intentional. So it is going to require a little bit more work for you to change your behaviors up front. However, your likelihood of success is going to be much higher, right? And the other thing too is when we talk about habits, it can get very intimidating because there's overwhelm and there's so many things that you should be doing. I should be eating better. I should be cooking my own food. I should be cleaning my house. I should be maintaining my car. I want to be doing my hobbies, right? My habits. My hobbies is what I meant to say. I want to be participating in my hobbies. And so you have all these things that sort of stack up on top of each other and it can get overwhelming. But the thing about it is, and like we've said on this call before, is once you get into the practice of that habit or get into the practice of easily building new habits, it can get much easier over time. But you have to put a little bit of that work up front. And so what you want to think about is first step is motivations. What's going to motivate me? And what I like to push a little bit on this. I use the example of, say, losing weight or being healthy, right? When we want to create better habits around our health, we may think about, I want to lose X number of pounds. I want to change my diet from A to B. I want to, go for a walk or whatever. We pick these specific things and that becomes a goal. And then we chase that goal. What I would offer is think about the motivation, right? The motivation is not to lose weight. The motivation could be to live a happy, full life, right? Which is kind of a shift in the way you think about it. So if you think about it as, I want to live, a full life, and I don't want to be infirm in my elder years. I want to be robust and living independently and able to get around. And I want to be able to enjoy my grandchildren. I want to be able to enjoy the people around me. I want to be able to enjoy my hobbies. So that is living a full, robust life. And that in order to best live that full, robust life, you need to be healthy, right? You need to have a strong body. You need to eat well. So instead of thinking about I need to lose weight, think instead about I want to have a rich, robust life that I can truly enjoy. Make that your motivation. That is way more powerful than I need to lose weight or I need to get to the gym. So this is kind of the starting point, is to create that better motivation. Now, there's four types of motivations that we talk about, and what I would say is it's best if you can have all for one of each, right, for any particular endeavor you want to undertake. But let me go through them quickly. So the first type of a motivation is an emotional motivation. So this is driven emotionally, whether it's positive or negative, right? So for example, it could be excitement, it could be anger. So if you're trying to drop a bad habit, then maybe you have a negative emotion motivation, right? So that bad habit that I have makes me feel bad after the fact. And that bad feeling becomes my emotional motivation because I want to avoid that bad feeling. As an example, the second one, biological or physical, right? So these have to do with the body. So maybe, the body needs X amount of sleep. The body needs X amount of water, right? The body needs good, unprocessed, wholesome food, right? So the things that your body needs can be motivations for behavior change as well. And that doesn't necessarily correlate just to health and diet and exercise. That can be something like I need to have good sleep so I can be good at my job, right? So that is a biological motivation. Then we have social motivations, and social motivations are really fun because this is where you want to consider your group, right? So we should all have a tribe. You guys probably have tribes. I have a tribe. We should always be having a tribe. We should always have a tribe that is going to be a group of people that can motivate us, right? People that can sort of push us forward. And so the social motivation is basically based on the people that are around you, right? So if you ever noticed, fit people tend to hang out with each other, right? Successful business people tend to hang out with each other, right? Athletes tend to hang out with each other. And so that's because there is a social motivation that is drawing them together. Then there's a spiritual type of motivation. So this is, it doesn't don't necessarily equate spiritual with religious. You certainly can equate those two. And that's certainly a fair equivalency, but this could also be more of like a purpose, right? So for example, my purpose is to go out and help as many people as I can to live a better life, right? Sort of up their game in all dimensions of their life. That's my purpose. So for me, that is a spiritual motivation to engage in good habits, like, for example, doing this call. Right? So those are the different types of motivations. And so I encourage you to consider those when you are, as a first step to creating better habits. The second one is triggers. Okay, so what's a trigger? That's a word that gets used a lot, right? We think about our triggers as the things that sort of irritate us, right? Or the things that will spawn a particular reaction. And that's just what they are. So a trigger is a thing that prompts a behavior or prompts a reaction, right? So what you want to do as a second step is once you've identified the motivations, then you come and say, okay, what are the things that I can actually create that are going to prompt me to engage in the behavior, right? So for example, one that one of my friend Steve Finnegan gave to me was about getting to the gym in the morning. And he said, get your running shoes and put them in the middle of the floor, whatever the first space that you walk into, right? So for me, that's my office, right? So put the running shoes in the middle of the floor where I'm inevitably going to trip over them, right? There's no way for me to avoid the running shoes. And so that is my prompt. Put on the running shoes and get your to the gym, right? So, and of course, there's other things that you can do too. I mean, you could set a reminder. It could be something as simple as setting a reminder on your calendar. It could be asking your spouse to remind you of something. Could be the trigger. Asking your children to remind you of something. I do have one set up with my kids. Is they're always telling me to put my phone down, right? Which is great. So that's a trigger. My kids tell me to put the phone down. That's my trigger to get engaged with them, right? Put the phone down and become present so I can pay attention to my children. So there's various things that you can set up. It could also be have a song that comes on. If there's a particularly motivational type of a song that you like, have that have your Siri play it for you at a specific moment in time to get you prompted. So those are triggers. The third one is now you're into repetition. Okay, so you have the motivation for the behavior, you have the trigger that prompts you to engage in the behavior. You are now doing the behavior, and what you want to do is you want to repeat, rinse and repeat, right? Some scientists say that it can take It can be as quick as 63 days. I don't know how they came up with that number. That's the number. 63 days to rewire your brain to something, right? So if you think about it, it may sound intimidating at first that you're going to have to engage in a new behavior for 63 straight days. But if you think about it in the grand scheme, that's a fleck, right? That'll go by so fast. So 63 days of repetition in order to rewire that into your brain so that it just becomes automatic. Now, after on day 64, right? If you are following this average, then you're not even having to think about that behavior. You don't even need to be triggered for the behavior. It just becomes automatic. So repetition is really important. Now, the other thing too is I would just throw in here, for example, if you're trying to work out more, don't start a new habit by telling yourself that you're going to go work out every day of the week, right? If you're going to try to lose weight, don't start out by telling yourself that you're going to lose 30 pounds, right? If you are trying to be less angry with your children, don't tell yourself, I'm never going to be angry again, right? You start out small. So for example, in the first case, you might say, I'm going to go work out one day a week, right? You work out one day a week. And then you start repeating that one day a week. And once you have successfully repeated that one day a week, you take it up to 2 days. And same thing, whether it's screaming at your kids, right? Tell yourself, I am going to scream at my kids one less time, right? If you scream at them 10 times in a week, say, okay, this week it's going to be 9. I'm going to remove one scenario this week in which I otherwise would have reacted with anger towards my children. And then once you get that down for a couple of weeks, you go to the next phase and you say, okay, now I'm going to take it to half, right? Half the number of scenarios in which I would have otherwise reacted in anger is now going to be, I'm going to do that half as many times. And so you just keep repeating those small steps, and then they eventually become, a new behavior. The last one is rewards, distinct from the motivation, right, that got you started to begin with. So the reason I'm going to exercise and eat well is because I want to live a full, robust life. That's my motivation. But now the little rewards, right? So set up little rewards for yourself because it is hard at first, right, to engage in then changed behavior. And there's nothing wrong with giving yourself a little treat. So for example, let's say, going back to the Steve Finnegan, when he coached me on, motivating myself to get into the gym. So the first thing he said, the trigger was put the sneakers in the middle of the room. Then he said, as your reward, if you're a person who likes to listen to podcasts or audiobooks, tell yourself that you are only going to listen to the audiobook while you're in the gym, right? So for me, normally I'll take time out of at least 3 or 4 days out of the week to listen to a podcast. And I usually will kind of basically stop what I'm doing. I'm not a very good multitasker. So I'll take time out to sit and listen to and enjoy and learn from a podcast. And they're always educational. I always get something out of it. But I can do that while I'm on the treadmill or while I am working out or while I'm on my bike or taking a walk, right? So the treat, so rather than just indulge myself in a podcast, I correlate that now to getting to the gym. So I'm only allowed to do it, when I'm getting exercise. So that's a way to set up rewards. You can also do something like and it can be food, right? It can be a candy. It can be a stop and get a Starbucks. And so maybe you set your rule up, when I engage in that behavior on my way home, I'm going to stop and pick up my double latte or whatever, make it a small, not a large one. So that is that's a way to set up rewards for yourself, and there's no shame in it, right? You don't want to overindulge. So those are the 4 steps. But first, like we said last week, it really kind of goes back to identity change, right? So if you're trying to write a book, and you're struggling with write a book or put out a song, right? What you do is you change your behaviors so that you are acting in a way that a songwriter or an author would, right? Change your identity. So if I want to write a book, I'm not going to think of myself as a non-book writer who wants to write a book. I'm going to think of myself as a person who writes. And then the behavior I'm going to follow that up with is I'm going to write 1 paragraph a day, right? I'm just going to continue writing 1 paragraph a day, and I'm going to set up my motivation, and I'm going to set up my triggers, and I'm going to set up my repetition and my rewards to make sure that I am writing a paragraph every single day. So that's how we would go about the process of creating new habits.